Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, October 4th, 2024, and today we are going to be talking about the battleground state of Nevada, a state that we haven't seen much conversation around. Nevada is a state that Democrats have won historically in every election in the 21st century except for the 2004 presidential. Democrats have had really significant luck here when it comes down to Senate races, some governor races, and more focused on the presidential race where, again, Democrats really haven't lost the state in nearing 20 years. And the Republican Party has made a concerted effort that Nevada was going to be a state that this cycle, they were going to win. The Republican Party invested a lot of money, continues to invest a lot of money in it, and after the 2022 midterms, where Republicans flipped the governorship from blue to red, a lot of hope here was instilled for Republicans up across the state, especially in the wake of an aftermath of a Democratic Party reshuffling of leadership since the 2020 presidential election. Now, for a bit of historical context, Nevada, despite being a strong Democratic state, hasn't always been a state that has been the best in terms of margin for the party. When you take a look at historical elections like 2020, Joe Biden only won Nevada by just 2.4%. The funny thing of that is that it was the exact same margin of Hillary Clinton in 2016, with minimal shifts across really any of the counties. And you can see it in the way that it has operated over the past 20 years. In close and competitive races, Nevada typically is a close and competitive state. The only time where it really shined through for Democrats was in the 2012 presidential and 2008 presidential, when Obama won it by 7 points, and get this, in 2008 by 12.5%. But in 2004, when George W. Bush won it, it was still a close race. George W. Bush did phenomenally amongst Latino voters across the United States, and despite John Kerry winning in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, 3 states that Hillary Clinton failed to carry, he lost the state of Nevada, but flipped in 2016. And even in the year 2000, we saw George W. Bush 3.5% margin of victory in Nevada. It was a state that was, in a way, good for the GOP, but still a competitive one. And so it was that Obama turn that really pushed Nevada to being a state that was more for the Democratic Party. And this cycle, Donald Trump was hoping that with the reduction in Latino support we have seen across the nation for the Democratic Party, I kid you not, you can see NBC News just did a new poll. I wish I had it up here for you, but they actually showed us that in their data, they found a reduction in support from what was a 30-point margin for Hillary Clinton in 2016, which was a big reason why you saw areas like Miami-Dade County and Florida give Hillary Clinton a 29.6% victory, to a reduction in 2020, roughly 10 to 15 point swing across the nation, which swung a lot of counties in Florida, made counties like Miami-Dade go from, again, 29 to 7. Massive Latino outreach done here by the Democratic Party. All of it really didn't seem to translate to electoral victory. And then in 2024 now, Kamala Harris's lead, according to NBC News and Univision, is just 14 points amongst Latino voters. And that would mean, traditionally, if everything else was to stay the same from the last cycle, that Nevada would be an automatic pickup for the Republican Party. And honestly, it seemed to be that way earlier on in this election cycle. When it was Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, where Joe Biden wasn't making up the gains that Donald Trump was making amongst Latino voters and minority voters in general, it looked like Biden was going to get wiped out in this state. And Donald Trump maintained a 5.6% on average lead against the incumbent president, which was massive for the Republican Party. And it showed in partisan and nonpartisan pollsters. Remington Research, which is one of the Republican pollsters in the state, they found that Donald Trump led by 7. Then Bloomberg, a nonpartisan pollster, said that Trump was up by 5. Then Emerson, another nonpartisan pollster, said Trump was up by 5. Then Insider Advantage said Trump was up by 7. And you can see that the lead here had been pretty maintained. Joe Biden did not have the reach to Latino voters, 1, that Hillary Clinton had, didn't even happen in 2020, or 2, the reach that he had in 2020. And it was on top of a collapse amongst other minority groups, and on top of white working class voters and white voters in general that moved further away from the Democratic Party. Altogether, when it was Trump versus Biden, it was a perfect combination for a Donald Trump victory. My last election prediction between Trump and Biden, before Biden dropped out of the race, Nevada was a red state. Now, it's a lot simpler to see why Kamala Harris has taken what was a 5.6% advantage to get this, a 1-point lead in the state of Nevada, and now a Republican firm, and one of the more respected ones across the state, say Kamala Harris is up. And it is a really interesting point, too, because they're not just saying she's up by 0.1 or 0.5. You love to see, we really like to see polls that do come down to narrow margins, because it really shows that this race is just as competitive as we might thought. But Nevada, for a particular reason, I do think Kamala Harris stands to do better than what people are expecting. I made a video about Arizona yesterday. Same thing in Nevada, abortion referendum on the ballot. But beyond that point, too, the historical inaccuracies in the state of Nevada do make me inclined to believe that Kamala Harris does lead by the margin that is suggested by this Republican firm. And it's a 3-point lead in a state where it has arguably been going back and forth. Kamala Harris has maintained an advantage ever since the beginning of September, where she was, in fact, losing to Trump in the earlier stage. When the swap out of the candidates happened immediately, she was down 4, then down 4 again, down 3 points, down 2 points, down 1 point, and then eventually she took the lead. Again, a massive change in terms of direction for the party and Kamala Harris's candidacy altogether. But this 1.1% advantage for Vice President Harris is boosted by these 3-point advantages that we are seeing now by these GOP firms. But again, back to that point about historical inaccuracy also brings me to my understanding of why it is Nevada could be underestimating Kamala Harris the same way it underestimated many Democrats in past elections. You can see that Nevada, while it was a state that Biden was certainly on track to lose, was still a state that overestimated Republicans in previous elections without a doubt. For instance, in the 2022 Nevada Senate race, Adam Laxalt was up against Catherine Cortez Masto. Now, if you don't know Adam Laxalt, he's a formerly elected statewide official. He was attorney general from 2015 to 2019. He ran for governor in 2018, lost, then decided he was going to run for Senate in 2022. His father was a representative from the state of Nevada. He served in Congress for the state, and he was a name that was recognizable and, in a way, appreciated. But Adam Laxalt, who lost in 2018, thought 2022, an environment that ended up being 11 points more Republican than 2018, that this would be his time to shine. Instead, it wasn't. But what missed the mark here was the polls. The polls that showed Adam Laxalt with an on-average lead of 3.4%. The most recent ones right before the election, The Hill and Emerson, showed Adam Laxalt up by 5. The most recent ones, Data for Progress, a Democratic firm, showed Republicans up by 2. Insider Advantage showed Republicans up by 6. Trafalgar had Republicans up by 5. Laxalt's lead was 3.4, and in a way, this swing was outside the margin of error because Catherine Cortez Masto won by roughly a point. That is nearly a 5-point swing across the state of Nevada. That wasn't good for polls in general and wasn't good for the GOP whatsoever. But it extends beyond the midterm elections. We remember 2022 missed the mark for a lot of polls across the country. But Nevada is actually a state where we've seen this as a pretty consistent trend line dating all the way back to Obama in 2008. And let's take a look. In 2020, it sort of redeemed itself by getting it spot on, but 2.4% to 2.4%, no inaccuracy. Sure, that's strong. But take a look at this. 2016, the Senate race in Nevada. What was supposed to happen? Cortez Masto was ahead by 1.8%, but the final results were 2.4, an improvement nonetheless. But the presidential is what I found to be the most interesting, because in 2016, we were under this assumption that, Hillary Clinton, after the election, Hillary Clinton was overestimated in every single state, right? There was massive silent Trump vote that was missed. But in Nevada, it actually was the opposite. Hillary Clinton won by 2.4% in Nevada. Donald Trump was supposed to win the state by 0.8. Emerson again had Clinton just up by 1. Gravis Institute had Clinton up by just 2. Remington Research had Trump up by 1. CNN had Trump up by 6. And so you start to understand that in the final stretch of the campaign in Nevada, Donald Trump was beating Hillary Clinton by Election Day, according to the polls. And yet, similar to 2022 and similar to previous elections, which we'll take a look at in just a moment, the improvement for Hillary Clinton was roughly over 3 points, which is important to note. Because if Kamala Harris is up by 3 points in a GOP pollster, what's to say that she doesn't actually win the state by 5 or 6 points? Now, I don't think that's going to happen, but I do think Kamala Harris is far closer to victory in Nevada than we otherwise thought over the past 2 months, which is really good news for the Democratic campaign when it comes down to campaign math, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. And continuing on, we can take a look at historical polls. 2012, Obama was up by 2.8 in these polls, 2.8%. What happened? He won by 6.7. In 2008, he was up by 6.5 in the polls. What happened? He won by 12.5. This is a consistent trend here for the Democratic Party to be underestimated in the state of Nevada, and it has been very, very consistent. And when you take a look, I guess they're not going to show us that, historically, when they've had it up, you can find almost any race with very limited exceptions. I think the 2022 governor's race might be the only exception there, but we don't actually have the polls there unless we get to it with their governor projection, because that's the only area where Nevada's in. Nevada. I don't even know if they're covering it here. Oh, Joe Lombardo wins by 2.8. Yes, we're not going to get there, but when you take a look at the governor results, I actually think it might have been closer, so it might have been also true on that point, 1.5. So even then, underestimated Democratic support. Regardless, though, I will say Republicans did well in the governor's election. Let's not take that away from them. But beyond that, I can't really point to any major elections, and even then, they underestimated Democratic support in the governor's race, even if Democrats ended up losing that race altogether. And so when we get back to this point about thinking about Nevada and its importance in the grand scheme of things, we have to understand that its 6 electoral votes genuinely can make a difference. Now, this is a topic of conversation that I wanted to explore a bit further on this channel. I'm saying this now because I think there's a very real reality in which it happens. And I know if you're watching this, you might disagree or you might agree. I have no idea. But here's my take. As of right now, I do think there is a very strong possibility that we end up with an electoral map where Kamala Harris wins the state of Wisconsin, where Kamala Harris wins the state of Pennsylvania, and loses the state of Michigan. I've noticed a massive reduction, not massive, but a noticeable reduction in support for Kamala Harris in that battleground state. What we've started to notice is that in some of these competitive races, for instance, Wisconsin, right, you can see has Harris up by 0.8. In the state of Pennsylvania, you have a tie here, but some pretty promising results from the more respected pollsters in the state. There's a lot of Republicans firm here that show Trump ahead. For instance, you can see Trafalgar, Trump +3, Atlas Intel, Trump +3, Remington Research, Trump +1, Trump +1, Inside Advantage, Trump +2. These are all formerly or current Republican firms, and they all show Trump with a lead. Now, I do agree it's probably closer to a tie than it is to a Donald Trump victory, but I still believe Kamala Harris has the advantage. When you take a look at some of the stronger polls in the state, some of the more respectable ones, pretty strong, right? Fabrizio and Zaloni, this is strong for the Democratic Party because it's one of the more respected ones. It's an ARP poll. It's a nonpartisan one. Fabrizio's Republican and Zaloni's a Democrat. They work together to get better data for AARP in general. What you find here is Harris is up by 3 again. Nevada, though, back to that point about why its electoral math matters, is to that point. That if Michigan, for instance, again, let's just humor it for a moment. Let's say Michigan ends up going to Donald Trump. That puts him at 265, which means Kamala Harris would have to win Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, which I wouldn't see being too far out of the fray, right? I think Kamala Harris holds the advantage in Nebraska second. I think she holds the advantage in New Hampshire. She certainly holds the advantage in Colorado and New Mexico. And we talked about it yesterday. I talked about how, Kamala Harris could have a very good shot in Arizona, especially with that abortion referendum on the ballot. Look at Nevada. Those 6 electoral votes genuinely can make a difference or could be a major piece of the puzzle to a Kamala Harris victory. If Trump wins it, he wins. If Kamala Harris wins it, she wins. And I know it seems impractical, but I will say this. I think that we need to explore Michigan a lot further. We're a month out from the election. There are some serious warning signs to the Democratic Party that I do think right now Kamala Harris, hold the election day, can win Michigan. But does it mean that she's going to be favored to do so on Election Day? I really, really don't know. We've seen a combination of factors here. Messaging that really resonates in the areas with electric vehicle plants in Michigan, where you're finding that the Republican Party is actually making inroads amongst the white working class, increasingly maxing out those rural areas, right? What you're also finding, too, is decreased turnout in Democratic base areas. You are finding that, sure, there are voters out there that are in the swing, that are independents that are voting for Kamala Harris, but there are a number of Democrats that will not vote for her, for reasons related to the Israel-Palestinian conflict, for reasons related to electric vehicles, for reasons related to things that are unique and focused on the state of Michigan. And I think we start to see that in terms of the unions that are now not endorsing Kamala Harris. A bit of a draw away from what handed Biden that 3-point victory in Michigan. And don't get me wrong, we could also be underestimating Kamala Harris in Michigan, but I do think that I would not be shocked whatsoever if Wisconsin and Pennsylvania went to Kamala Harris and Michigan went to Trump, because that's really where I see Michigan at this point. This is something that has really come more recent with a bit more information and more conversation. But beyond that point, too, put that to the side. Assuming that happens, if Arizona gets to go to Kamala Harris, which if Nevada does, probably Arizona too, Nevada is going to be a state that could make a difference, a massive difference. And Democrats do have a combination of factors that suggest that they may be on track for a strong victory in that battleground state. Now, even though Kamala Harris is seeing some reduction in Latino support across the country, at the same time, Kamala Harris is making massive gains amongst white voters across this nation, specifically in suburban regions and arguably even in some urban regions. It's done the same thing that we saw in 2020 where they're counteracting the pull away, right? For instance, a great example of this is the state of Texas, which ended up narrowing down roughly 4 points from the 2016 election, less than that, but under 4 points from the 2016 election towards the Democratic Party. Obviously, Democrats didn't win Texas, but based on the numbers and the shifts amongst minority voters in Texas, you would assume Donald Trump expanded on his 2016 margins, and you can see this really well visually. You can see that in this entire area across the southern border, this is a huge pocket of Latino voters across Texas in specific. You are talking about historically strong Democratic voters in areas like Starr County that shift 55 points more Republican, areas like Maverick County that shift 46 points more Republican. Massive, massive gains from the last election. And this isn't just that there's new voters out there. This is the fundamental fact that minority voters in Texas, specifically Latino voters in the state of Texas, shifted away from the Democratic Party in 2020, but Biden counteracted that. And not only counteracted it, his counteracting was enough that he improved on Hillary Clinton's loss in the state from 9 points to 5.6, and he did so. Where are these coming from? Areas like Austin and Dallas and Houston. Take a look at the surrounding areas. The Democratic firms doing better. Democratic areas doing better. Democratic areas doing better. Democratic areas doing better. And because the population is concentrated around here, right? Starr County, which shifted 55 points more Republican, 20,000 votes combined there, versus Kaufman County, 50,000 votes, 13 points more Democratic, or even some much more populist ones. You can take a look too. Harris County is a perfect example. Over 1 million votes, 1 point more Democrat, right? That is enough to counteract any of those counties. And when you're seeing it in a large swing, and largely from white voters, suburban voters, etc., that's where you start to see it happen. And I think we could be seeing a similar thing happen in the state of Nevada. Now, I think this is a warning sign for Republicans across the state, especially since the Senate race, we didn't talk about it much, but it's not looking good for them whatsoever. Jackie Rosen, the incumbent Democrat, is arguably running against a, in theory, strong Republican, who's down 8.5%. It's a trend line here we've started to see across a number of battleground Senate races where Democrats are actually in a position, very, very strong ones when it comes down to the Senate races. But the presidential race is becoming increasingly more clear that Kamala Harris is the favorite in the state of Nevada. And now even the Republican firms, which used to pick up Donald Trump being in the lead, are now showing her in the advantage. A respectable GOP firm that really shows warning signs for the GOP in this state. And I could very well see how Kamala Harris wins Nevada by 2, 3, 4 points and likely could translate that to a presidential victory if it does come down to this individual state. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the top of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 presidential election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.